Floyd Bennett Field is in the Marine Park neighborhood of Brooklyn. It was, interestingly, New York City's first municipal airport, and then later it became a World War II naval air station. Today, this area has over 1,300 acres of grassland, salt marshes. There's a marina, and it's used for recreational purposes like camping and biking and archery, gardening, ice skating, hockey, gymnastics, other indoor sports. It's one of the great green spaces in that entire part of Brooklyn. And it is very isolated. It was an airport. And by definition, airports are normally located in isolated areas near the water. Planes were coming in and out. Now, amidst the migrant crisis, the Biden administration has granted permission for the state to use Floyd Bennett Field to house 2,000 migrants. New York City has entered into a one-year lease agreement with the federal government and will pay the federal government $1.7 million. The state says they will reimburse the city. So the city and the state are paying the rent from the federal government to house migrants, which created the problem in the first place. And the first 3 months have to be paid up front. In exchange, the city will be able to use 30 acres of land as an emergency shelter. Total cost, $20 million, paid for by the state. So the state's paying the federal government millions to house migrants, even though the state has no legal responsibility, and it's a federal responsibility. The city will now need to build a massive shelter, even though they are in the worst position to assume the responsibility compared to the state and federal governments. The neighborhood will need to endure an influx of thousands of people with extreme needs, healthcare, education, social services, etc. And again, the site, as it is remote, has very little transportation, few supportive services. And the community, frankly, is just fed up with the government incompetence, and people are at their breaking point. Joining me today to talk about this is New York Assemblywoman Jaime Williams. Since 2016, Assemblywoman Williams has served the 59th Assembly District, which encompasses the Brooklyn neighborhoods of Canarsie, Georgetown, Mill Basin, Marine Park, Bergen Beach, and Gerritsen Beach. Assembly Member Williams is a strong advocate for her community and a spokesperson raising serious issues that need attention. She speaks to this site specifically, but it also addresses the larger issue. The Assemblywoman is passionate, she's energized, and she is demanding answers, and she has a right to. Assemblywoman Williams, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Gov, for having me on today's show.
Oh, my pleasure, Assemblywoman. So, did I get it right, the situation at Floyd Bennett Field?
You're absolutely right. You touched upon everything possible. And our community feel as though like we're being violated. And you're seeing something that hasn't happened in a very long time, where two neighboring communities that share Floyd Bennett Field as their backyard coming together. You know, it's not a Democrat or political thing. You know, there's no clear-cut way as to clean the side of the street, right? So you're seeing here residents coming together to protect our communities, but even more so to protect our national park. And we talk about national park. Every American in the United States of America should be concerned about this, because what makes Floyd Bennett Field different from Yellowstone or other national parks, right? It's an abuse of power. And we can say going back to 1972, right? In September 27, Congressman Frank Brasco fought to protect Floyd Bennett Field, right? It was slated for X amount of land to be taken to build housing on there. and there's legislation protecting Floyd Bennett Field, prohibiting housing from being developed there. So what are we saying? Are we above the law? Are we making up the laws as we go, without having a proper dialogue with local electeds like myself, Assembly Member Stacey Ferforomato, or Council Member Joanna Ariola, which we have taken a stand? And you said it's not just a New York City crisis, it's a New York State issue. So where are all the other Democrats on this? Are we just sitting on the
Yeah.
bleachers to see what's going to happen? One person take the target? You know what? This is an issue, and throwing money at this issue, it's not going to solve it, right?
Yeah. Just as an aside, you raise an interesting issue. This is a national park. And national parks in general, but national parks are normally sacrosanct to development. Just as an aside, uh, I worked with the National Park Agency to make the Shirley Chisholm Park, which is right next to this site. And they were so difficult, the federal government. I was going to make it a state park, but they were so reluctant to turn the national park into a state park. It took me months and months to deal with them because their point was a national park is sanctified essentially, and we're not going to make any change to a national park. But here, they're going to make a national park a temporary site, at a minimum temporary, for migrant housing. And it's not really temporary because these people are not going anywhere for many, many years, right? The whole asylum process is supposed to be 3 to 5 years. So there's going to be very little temporary about this. So to do it on a national park site is really extraordinary. And I understand not only that it's a national park site, it's a remote site, and it's a tremendous number. They're talking about 2,000 migrants. Is that right?
Yes, they're talking about 2,000 migrants so far, but in the lease, it's saying that that number can also be modified. Just remember, and this was their answer in yesterday's meeting. Before I go forward, where we met with Congressman Bruce Westerman, who is the chair of Natural Resources, and Congressman Paul Gosar, the chairman of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigation, right? Why is that important? Because this is a singular issue that is important to them, right? A natural issue. Again, so we talk about this whole thing, right? So it's just not an ideal site. We talk about that. We talk about the flooding. We talk about 200 migrants. Yesterday, we were told that these migrants, if they decide to leave this area, they can leave on their own. There is no accountability. They can check in, they can check out. Who says they can come back? They don't have to come back. So say, for instance, the first week, 100 leaves. Who is to say that they're not replacing that 100, right? What about the crime that is happening within the facility, right? That they are not sharing with the public. It was shared that last Friday there was an issue at the Roosevelt Hotel where one person got stabbed. Why is that not open to the public, right? They're letting some electeds go in to view some of these migrant shelters, but then there are others that they're not letting in, right? So for us, I mean, where is the line drawn here, right? You're taking away and also let me just touch on this. Also, NYPD, we have the 63rd precinct. That's located off of Avenue J, right? You're taking our cops to act as security guards for these migrants. Just last night, a neighbor of mine's, his car was stolen from his driveway, right? So where is our concern as a city, as a state? Are we protecting our fellow citizens? Where is the safety? What are we doing about crime? Right? When we are taking away the mere services that is there to protect and serve our city.
Assemblywoman, are these singles or are these families?
As we know it as of yesterday, it's single men.
The city's going to have to build a facility, right? What are they going to do? Convert an airplane hangar?
No, they're looking at runway 19. And yesterday, as you know, it rained quite a bit, and there was at least half an inch of water on that runway. They're saying, it's one of the highest point. It's really not, right? You have to, if they're putting a tent there, is this tent going to be elevated, right? What are they going to do? The grassland is protected areas. So are you going to man 2,000 migrants and said, hey, you cannot walk on the grass, right? A simple thing as someone growing vegetables there. There's a part where we have our small garden. They have to follow protocols, right? There is a process. And here we are breaking everything and have an answer for most things, right, to build this migrant tent there. How is that going to prohibit any of the other acts from happening? Parents that use the aviator, they're concerned, they're furious, they're outraged, right? Who wants to send their children there when there's a big migrant facility there? We talk about climate change. Where is all that fumes and all that different things? Where is it going to go?
So the plan is they're going to build a tent that can house 2,000 migrants and then bring in everything. They'll have to bring in facilities, restrooms, showers, everything. It's basically just a tent city, if you will.
A tent city, bringing in hot food, all our resources, medical resources, and so forth. And then I guess they would have people monitoring, I guess, very similar to when Superstorm Sandy hit, where, for instance, like in Brooklyn, in Coney Island in specific, in the MCU parking lot, where they had, this setup of all the resources there.
Yeah, I was there.
Right.
I remember that all too well. Who pays? The city will provide all the services, and the city pays, or the state pays?
So the state, this is very funny. So our current governor is financing this, this money. So again, as you know, you've been the governor for quite a few years, and could the state sustain this? From what I was told in this last budget going into 2024, we're looking at a deficit, right? So now you have X amount of millions to throw basically at New York City, right? Creating an issue where, it's going to cost the state millions of dollars. Could the state sustain this? We would go bankrupt, right? And we talk about taxpayers, their dollars. I mean, clearly, it's an abuse of the taxpayers' dollars, right? To take this. And again, we can go back, right? I mean, is upstate better than downstate? Why are we making it so, divisive, putting one against the other, right? You're the governor. You want to do what's good for the state. Expand it. Open it. You've taken this burden upon you. You have failed the New Yorkers, the people that live here, right? That is fighting to keep their house, their roofs over their head, pay their property taxes, just live, right? But we're taking all of that away from them.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. The Assemblywoman has the majority of the Assembly members are in New York City. This is especially acute for you because this is a very large shelter. It's in an area that I believe is inappropriate totally. But the other members must understand this issue, right? Because they're building these shelters all over the city. What does the delegation say about this situation? Isn't there a unity among, or shouldn't there be a unity among the delegation where they say this is craziness?
Well, there should be unity, but apparently there is no unity. In this game, it seems like, people are choosing they don't want to ruffle the feathers of the governor or the mayor for whatever reasons or aspirations. It's a very, very hot topic, right? And we know these days with the words that we choose, we can be anti or and so forth. But at the end of the day, we all did take an oath to represent our constituency. And this is where we stand as a community. And again, it's not about anything political. It's citizens over politics. Citizens over politics, right? And who doesn't want to stand up to the plate and call it out for what it is? Shame on you. Because not until it happens to you and in your backyard, then you're going to come out. And whether or not it happens in their backyard or not, every single person in this state of New York that we love so dearly is going to be impacted. Because if the governor is fitting the bill, right, it sounds French, almost French to me, financier, it sounds really French, right? It's going to affect us, right? Upstate members, are they going to take the vote to increase money to be sent to New York City? One way or the other, it's going to impact every single one. And we talk about bail reform and clean slate. It is worse than that. It is worse. And you know what year we're going into? An election year. So are you going to save yourself, Governor, and try to save your members upstate while this happens downstate? Well, this needs to really be rethink again.
Yeah. First, just as an aside, you said the delegation doesn't like to ruffle the governor's feathers. They had no problem ruffling my feathers. What is the timing here? Just the Assembly and Senate, the legislature comes back in January. Will this happen before January? Obviously, in January, you'll have your members right there in Albany. They'll all be assembled. It'll be easier to communicate. But does this happen before January? Do you know?
The migrants coming to Floyd Bennett Field?
Yeah.
Well, they're saying that in another 2 to 3 weeks, right? So last night we filed the injunction. The attorney filed the injunction for us to go to court because one of the critical things that they overlooked, and I'm sure they will have a cover for that as well, was that the NIPA, the National Environmental Protection Act, right? And the EA was supposed to come before the public for a hearing to hear from the public. Nothing of that sort was done, right? Is this a special circumstance? You know what? It goes back to the governor and the mayor, right? Is this a national crisis? Now, if this is a national crisis, set forth by the Biden administration, well, all this would be baloney, right? It's a national crisis, but it's not a national crisis. It's a crisis within New York State.
Yeah.
And more so New York City.
Yeah. Assemblywoman, I think what you're doing is very, very important because what you're really saying is this doesn't make any sense. And it's amazing to me how the political system can just proceed down a nonsensical path. And it's like the army marching off a cliff and everyone just keeps marching in sequence and they just fall off the cliff one after the other. It makes no sense. If this was a national crisis, then where is the federal government? And why isn't the federal government doing the management of this situation? And why isn't the federal government paying for this situation? If it's a state crisis, then why isn't the state handling it throughout the entire state? Why is it just a New York City crisis? And why is New York City responsible for any of this? As I said earlier, it's not a sanctuary city issue. That has nothing to do with it. New York City didn't ask for this. And you look at how many people are coming to New York City versus the other cities, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So sometimes someone has to stand up and says, the emperor has no clothes. This makes no sense, guys. I know we're all marching to the band. And I know President Biden is a Democrat, and I know we're all Democrats, but this isn't a political issue. When we're doing something that hurts the public and makes no sense, we have to stand up and we have to say it. And that's really the point that you're making. The specific site aggravates all of the above. It's a park site, it's a remote, it's a flood area, etc. But the broader argument is so correct. This makes no sense, and no one is addressing it, and everybody's afraid of it because you'll be accused of being anti-migrant or anti-this. There's still something called common sense and logic, and that's what you are pursuing. And you do it with a strong voice, and you do it with courage, and you do it with guts. And if we're missing anything in this political time, it's people who stand up and tell the truth, even when it's not politically convenient. And that's what you're doing. And kudos to you for standing up and having the courage to speak truth to power. That's what you're doing. So good luck to you and good luck to your colleagues. And thank you for taking the time to share your situation with us. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you, Governor.
Good to be with you, Assemblywoman.